So our panel today, as Tammy so nicely introduced it, is about the fundamentals of getting luxury hospitality, particularly in the lodge and resort space, right. So as you all know, the opportunity in Africa is undeniable. That's why we're here. We've got we've got extraordinary landscapes, cultural heritage, and a global traveler that's increasingly looking for a really design and experience-led destination. With that opportunity comes fundamental question. What actually makes the project viable? Not just visionary, but bankable, buildable, and ultimately successful over the long term. Too often, we see developments driven by passion, particularly from an owner's side, location, or an aspiration from the brand. All critical ingredients in the development of these projects, but without fully aligning the underlying fundamentals. What are these? Is the demand truly there for ultra-luxury resorts and lodges in Africa? Is the product correctly positioned for the market and its location? Are development costs, access, and infrastructure realistically accounted for? And perhaps the most important question, can assets sustain performance through cycles, seasonality, and operational complexities? My panelists bring complementary perspectives to the table. A global brand operator, an experiential designer, an independent hotel specialist consultant, and an owner-operator, between them having delivered some of the most remarkable properties in Africa and beyond. Could each of you please introduce yourselves to the audience?
As the other female, I'll go first. Hi everyone, I'm Kirsten Manning. I am Head of Advisory at HTI Consulting. As Geri mentioned, we do advisory consulting and a lot of feasibility related work. This is a very interesting panel that I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks. I'm Guy McGregor. I'm the Managing Director at Luxury Frontiers. We are a global experiential design firm specializing in sustainable high-end hospitality. At our core, we are designers, architects, interiors, but we also offer a full turnkey service from project management to sourcing and supply.
Perfect.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Steve Mitchell. I go by Mitch. I'm the Managing Director of Global Lodges at Belmond. And in this context, Tommy, you'll be pleased to know global very much means Africa. We have 2 lovely lodges in Botswana, in the heart of the Delta, and in Chobe National Park. And in a previous chapter, I co-founded a luxury safari operator here in Kenya.
And good afternoon, my name is Baptiste Recher. I'm the Chief Development Officer for Accor luxury brands for the Middle East, Africa, and Turkiye region.
Thank you. JB, let's start with you. So Accor's Fairmont presence in Kenya is anchored by 2 signature safari assets. Can you tell us, in a market where flexibility is key, but the luxury brands are always built on consistency, how do you ensure you're delivering the right product with local feasibility constraints while protecting your brand standards?
Yeah, I think we've heard it a little bit on the previous panel. I think today what is key is the experience. It's really all about the experience and highly curated experiences and properties. So obviously there are elements where we will not compromise on, like fire, life, and safety elements, or IT, because if you don't comply with my IT standards, I just cannot connect you to my platform. And so long that you maintain the brand DNA somehow, the brand ethos within the project, what we are really looking for is trying to sourcing as much as possible locally, bringing local design inspiration artists as much as possible to blend within the project. So there are brand standards, there is design guidelines, there is brand essence, and we are flexible. I think what is key for a project to succeed, especially when we look at luxury lodges, first of all, I think there are three critical elements for us, is working with the local community. Are we actually adding value? Are we working with them? Are they on board with the project? Because if they are not, they're gonna make your life hell. This is gonna impact the guest experience and overall the financial result of the project. So you need to onboard them and make sure they're happy, they fully align with what you're doing, with the vision, with the brand. The second element is obviously the environment. So making sure that we are not in the destruction business, because the hospitality is one of great contributors of carbon emission globally, unfortunately. So we need to find solutions to make sure that we are either carbon neutral or even carbon positive with different sustainability solutions. But in any case, we are not in the business of destructing the environment. We are here to protect the animals, and work on conservancies, obviously, and ensure that the project has a positive impact where it's built. And the last point is to get the right advice, getting the right designers, the right consultant from day one to ensure everybody is aligned. So you align the stars for the project to succeed and become, a flagship, both working with the local communities, so successful with the local communities, with your staff, then your guests, and at the end, that usually results in good financial results.
For sure. Thank you. I appreciate that. Guy, from your perspective, how should developers balance the desire for iconic design-led experiences with the reality of the construction costs in each location and the operational complexity when it's really remote? I know you've got a few slides you want to show us.
Yes, yeah, I'll show. Sure, if I had $1 for every time we started a conversation or a project where someone was briefing us that they wanted something different and unique, I think I wouldn't need to work anymore. But the balance comes really with designing from experience and with context first, rather than form for form's sake. In remote environments that we operate, constraints and limitations shouldn't be seen as that, but rather the inputs and the key ingredients to a meaningful and enduring design. The most iconic properties are rarely ones that are overly complex. They're the ones that feel completely at home and in their setting. From our experience, where architecture, materiality, and the systems all naturally are extension of place. When you design with what's local and what's available and climatically appropriate for the space and operationally realistic, we often find that it really creates something distinctive and resilient. We did a project last year which we handed over in Uganda, Gorilla Forest Lodge, and we're proud to say that this project was 95% local manufactured items from the FF&E, construction materials. It was part of the brief that we had, but it is possible to deliver a luxury lodge at this level that is contextually appropriate. And we did small things like putting a little QR code in some of the cushions that the designers that we had worked with for months and months, so that they have a little website and it's sold in the boutique, and we can kind of continue that story and keep the economy going within the local context. Interestingly, we closed this budget out 22% under budget, and that was purely from the savings of traditional import duties that normally get levied on these high-end lodges. At Luxury Frontiers, we always start with the guest journey first. We like to see how that unfolds, how that connects with the landscape, and then we start with looking at back of house and how are we going to operate this thing, and how the operator is actually going to be successful, and then only front of house. And I think this, with the vision of the project and the realities of construction in these remote locations, really does set a project up for long-term success. We've also seen that when we impose complexities, some of the technology of complicated lighting systems, VinCard systems that maybe can't handle the power fluctuations or some of the challenges that come in these remote locations, they often don't hold up, and they end up resulting in cost overruns because these items are normally imported. You need special fundis to come in and fix this. So for us, it's really about keeping it simple. We also find that there's some exciting new things that are coming out in the space where solar and gym equipment, vehicles, there's actually feasibility exercises out there now that you can rent or lease model these items. And so there's a less capital upfront cost, and you're able to rather put it into the OpEx model. And that definitely does free up a lot of the funding. This is a project we did in the Delta, and it really just was completely natural to place. Obviously, we had the challenges of the incoming floods, and so we had to watch the ebbs and flow and design around that.
Oh, great. The QR code thing is fascinating. I mean, I remember the first time I stayed at the Latitude 15, before I knew Paul, and I tried to source one of the rubbish baskets that were grass Zimbabwean-made ones for years afterwards for my home, and I just didn't know where to get it. I didn't know the story behind it. No one in the hotel could tell me. And then also, just to add to your innovations and the way they've been designing, just in the last month, 3 of the projects I've reviewed for Banyan, I didn't introduce myself, but for Banyan, were rammed earth projects, which is also gaining a lot of traction. It's obviously a lot more sustainable as well. So, Mitch, on to you.
Hi, Geri.
So, Belmond owns and operates some of the most prestigious luxury hotels and resorts in the world. In your experience, how do you strike an equitable balance between land value and stakeholder participation? How do you also ensure that governments, communities, developers, and operators all benefit without compromising the viability of the project long term?
That's a really long question.
Sorry,
Thank
yes.
you. Firstly, I think in the context of Safari Lodge Africa, it's great to see so much interest from some international players. I think the industry is in a good place. If I see the development and the improvement in access, for example, with flights and just the changes in a place like Volcanoes National Park in Rwanda, and how the gorilla permits have really changed that country. Even in Maun in Botswana, you see how that little town has grown in the last 20 years. So I think there's a huge responsibility on some international operators to come in and help support the local market. Having said that, there's always room for improvement in how we operate and what we do. And I think in Africa, perhaps more than anywhere else in the world, there's this concept that if you want to go fast, you go alone, and if you want to go far, you need to go together. Now, we've had people speaking about the communities this morning and this afternoon, and this is very relevant. But equally, it's around the underlying land arrangements sometimes, and I see too often properties wanting to buy the property, own it, and then keep the community at arm's length, or the community sees for employment or foundation initiatives or the rest, and not actually participating in the business as a stakeholder. Obviously, if you buy a property, you've got a buy-sell relationship. There's a winner, there's a loser, there's a transaction involved. I was at a lodge the other day, and they even proudly told me they'd employed someone to try and buy the neighbor's farm because they wanted to expand, and he wasn't selling to them, and they couldn't understand. And I was like, but we should be taking them together. We should be going together, in one and sharing the benefits in an equitable way. Now, obviously, what that equitable way is depends from place to place, and where Belmond operates in Botswana, I think is a really wonderful model where the government mostly controls the land, and we have these long-term leases, and you have to show that you're doing a whole bunch of good work, and they participating both on a fixed rental and a variable rental in the success of the business, which works, I think, really well, and is what has led to Botswana's sort of status. Yeah.
Thank you. I also think a lot of us, particularly the bigger brands, the influence that they hold, I want to say we, but I'm now with a very small brand, but I think where sustainability is key, overdeveloping in certain markets is also a huge consideration. The right project, the right owner, the right direction, the sustainability obviously long term as well, and the impact that it's going to have on the community and the location.
From what I've seen, there's a huge amount of goodwill from guests when they come to Africa. They come for the animals, they fall in love with the people, and it's the awe and wonder of seeing the lions and the leopards and the migration and all the rest. With that comes a responsibility to do good as well. I've also seen instances where maybe the good is not so good, but it's raised. But because there is work, there's so much goodwill from guests that it's fine. I think there's great opportunity to connect this community and this forum with the community that was here last month. There was a Business of Conservation conference right in this very room last month, led by the African Leadership University School of Wildlife. And I don't think there are many attendees who've been to both. Otherwise, I don't know if there's any show of hands, someone who was here last month with me. And I think this is a great, thank you. I think this is a great missed opportunity because conservation for conservation's sake is philanthropy, and there are thankfully many philanthropists out there in the world with ambitions to protect this world. But for those properties and those pieces of land to really reach market value of their potential as a value as the natural asset, the stars and all the rest of it, the market has a powerful role to play in doing that, and most of that at the moment falls on luxury ecotourism to do it, rather than media or hunting or other business models. So if we can combine those roles together, or those worlds, I promise you every single conservationist I met was talking about innovative financing models and how they were trying to raise money.
Yeah.
And there are more opportunities out there that one thinks if you just look.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that. So HTI Consulting have been around for a long time. You've also done numerous studies and been involved with a lot of projects across the continent. How do you think that international brands, so talk maybe the bigger brands, how do they compare with the very strong homegrown luxury operators like Singita and Beyond and others in the room? Can they actually add value? And is there space, or is there still a disadvantage to them?
I think it's a very complex question, and it's actually everyone has kind of spoken about a point that I'm going to bring together. I think you can't really compare the international operators with some of the local and regional operators. There's value in both, and there's disadvantages to both. When we look at the international operators, what they really do bring is their extreme distribution and their ability to bring new markets to these more remote locations. But with that, they also bring an element of investor security, because when you see these bigger brands showing interest, and I'm not even going to say just the Serengeti, because it's a name that we all know, but let's say, for example, Rua or the Selous, for example, when you see the bigger brands looking at those more remote, more exclusive, much more experiential destinations, it shows overall investor and market appetite. So I think it's twofold. When you look at the big operators, their strength in terms of distribution, their loyalty programs, bringing new markets to these destinations, but also adding an element of investor security. Because we actually had, I think one of the panels yesterday with the financiers, when you go to seek finance, it's not uncommon for some of these development banks to insist you have an international operator on board. So there is an element of sort of investor security, but with that being said, there's so many lessons to learn from the local guys, and that cannot be overshunned. We've seen it through today, talking about community, talking about flexibility and design. Even Jean-Baptiste mentioned it. We understand the brand standards, we do, and that you must keep the integrity of your brand, but in some of these more remote locations where your footprint is really what you're trying to focus on, and limiting that, building sustainably for the long term, but also within a certain more remote logistical challenges, how can we as a collective, as the professional team, come together and say, where do we each give a little, take a little, how do we each balance things out? Because ultimately we want these projects to be successful. When we look in the luxury space, we are in big money, we're talking very high millions, so we need to know we're getting the return, but we also can't forget about the overall community, the element of job employment, of the lessons to learn from a local partner. So I think a really important factor when the big operators come into these markets is learning from the locals, finding those local partners, having those conversations, and doing them as early on in their development process as possible. Because yes, they have us all there as advisors. We give our opinion to a point, but we need you to have the buy-in as the local operator, or as the international operator. So to me, it's not one versus the other, it's how can we learn from each other, and how can we improve a destination through your reach, but not forget about the truly authentic and experience that the local and regional operators have.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think there's definitely space for everyone, and everyone adds value in a different way. It's just, we do need to look at the bigger picture. And it's okay to say no to a project because you don't believe in it, or you think it's oversubscribed or supplied. So,
and I think we complement each other quite well, right? Because the local players have the local knowledge, but they don't necessarily have the equity, the brand equity in certain markets, right? So I think it's good for a destination to actually bring a bit of both, because you can tap into different markets, diversify the feeder markets as well. I think we complement each other and we can learn from each other, as you rightly pointed.
Completely. And ultimately, it improves the destination as a whole. I do think the markets are big enough for everyone to play equally.
Yeah, I mean, look at Mozambique as an example, where Oman had announced they're going in, Singita are now going in. All of a sudden, you know, my boss is asking, why are we not? We've got something in northern Mozambique under construction.
Why aren't you, Geri?
But, well, we are. We signed something 10 years ago, but, you know, COVID and everything else. But all of a sudden, that's on the map, and everyone's like, why is everyone not doing something? And, I mean, it's an untapped, exquisite country. Obviously, it has its complexities, as there are so many, but it's...
But if it was easy, it wouldn't be fun.
Exactly.
Geri, if I can just chip in and
Yeah.
kind of turn our
Sure.
topic on its head almost, is if you look back at lodge projects or luxury lodge projects which have then failed, I mean, I would expect everything looked good on paper to begin with. But the ones that have then got caught into trouble later on, it's because they haven't engaged on the positive impact stuff enough. You know, properties that have been burnt down or community have stormed the lodge and marched off the manager, all of the rest of it. And there's a lot of talk in Guy's world about building sustainably and minimizing one's impact. In Africa, you almost judged more on the positive impact that you're doing, and you've got a number of tools that you're available to do it. And I think that's a really important part of this feasibility, where it can go wrong if you're not doing that side of it to the extent. And what might be good enough for you and might be good enough for what your organization thinks may not be what the community thinks good enough, or the managing the expectations. And that really takes some very careful management to be.
Yeah, and it's very brand damaging if you do the wrong project in the wrong place with the wrong partner. So I'm going to close with two questions. I've split them. So obviously we romanticize the remoteness in Africa. That's appealing to everybody. Does it come at the expense of commercial viability? So Jean-Baptiste, to close, have you ever walked away from a deal in Africa because the fundamentals didn't stack up, even if the location was exceptional?
Yeah, of course, of course. I think for us what is important is the alignment of vision and values from day one. You know, we're very transparent. We've had a very good discussion last night with potentially a future partner. And you click immediately because you know what you're looking for in terms of value of sustainability, building and onboarding the community, sustainability, et cetera, is just there, right? And it's not always the case, right? Sometimes they're just thinking, oh, I want a franchise. It's all about the fees and the bottom line. To some extent, of course, you know, every project needs to be commercially, financially viable. The project needs to stand on its 2 feet. But, you know, especially I think African lodges, there needs to be an element of passion, of love for the community, for the place, respect of the place you're building this project in. If you have no interest in where you're building and you're completely disregarding the community, then I don't think we want to be associated with that. So yeah, in a nutshell, yes, we get a lot of requests. We didn't touch about the franchise managed model. We get a lot of franchise model, but a lot of times the developers, they want a franchise for the wrong reasons. They just want cheaper fees, but that's not the point. So I think there might be a model where, you know, we talked about the local players versus the big chain, you know, where we use the local players, you know, as operator for our brands. You know, that's something we can definitely look at if they've been successful, and we see this working very well. But most of the time, they're asking for a franchise for the wrong reasons, unfortunately.
Yeah. How about you, Guy? Have you walked away from anything?
Sure. Yes, we have. Similarly, I think you need to have that balance, but as practitioners in this space, I think we all have a responsibility to guide and direct investors and developers coming into Africa, and really holding their hand and sharing our learned experiences, and kind of holding the mirror up and showing them where they need to actually, you know, put more resource and energy. I did a project in Rwanda in 2018, and one of the first positions that were hired was the community liaison team member, on the ground, with the community, explaining that the roads are coming in. Yes, their potato farms are being marginalized, or the dust is a problem, but what is it going to mean for them from a community perspective? So for us, it's making sure that that conservation community partnership is in place and all the statutory elements are lined up. So,
Good. It's always good to know that we're willing. Mitch and Kirsten, in closing for you two, something different. So let's actually start with you, so Kirsten can close. If you had to personally invest your own capital into a luxury hospitality asset in Africa.
Assuming I've got a little bit more.
Yes, yes, obviously. What would it be, and where would you do this?
That's a really easy question. I live on the Kenyan coast in a little town called Kilifi, which is very untransactional by the Kenyan coast standards, and I think there's a wonderful couple of opportunities there, so it would be close to home, and of course the domestic market would be very strong.
And benefit from preferential
Exactly.
rates. How about you?
I'm going to be relatively similar to him and go close to home. I'm Zimbabwean, and for me, I love the bush, but I love the real bush. I love tents, I love remote locations, so for me it would be Monopools Tented Lodge. Very isolated, but very real Africa, real bush, and very small market. So exclusivity is for me.
Brilliant.
What about you, Geri?
Goodness. Throw that back. I would probably go with what I raised earlier, Mozambique. So one of the peninsulas, something maybe not pure lodge, where you've got a beach lodge, estuary, more bird-focused, I think. I think it's risky, but I think that's definitely where I would go next. Thank you for being with us. We have 58 seconds. I didn't even get you to stand up.
Thank you, Geri.
Yeah.